Anyone who's been curious or bored enough to look at my older content will have noticed that two videos are quite different in tone to what I'm making now. To start with, the content of the videos is from PCNA, or as PCEU is my main server. Then there's the gameplay and editing, which kind of sucks. So what were these videos all about? Well, I wanted to have some PvP fun with my friends over at Tamriel Trade Secrets. So I gave my level 30 Nightblade some extremely basic gear and I just had some fun beaming people with Solo Soul. It was stupid cheesy fun with no real idea behind it. Around the same time I was laughing with my friends about those overblown, over-edited ganking compilations where the player pretends to be real hot shit while farming obvious PvEers. Like these videos with shaky cams, bass boosted trap music and Wilhelm screams edited in, and featuring some kills that frankly I'd be embarrassed to even share on my own private Discord. So combining these two elements, I decided to use my crappy footage from PCNA and make a stupid compilation of my own. It didn't take long before people thought I was serious, so I stopped making those videos. I also did not return to PCNA for quite a while, as the fun of actually wanting people with an honor leveled character quickly wore off, as did my motivation to stay up until 4 AM due to the time difference. Since then, a lot has changed. I continued to play PvP on PCEU, where I got more involved in group play, got into healing, and just generally improved massively to a point where I didn't feel so mediocre anymore. PvP healing is my main jam in ESO now, and I've made several videos on the topic already, which you should of course check out. I've played in Zergs, casual guilds, try-hard ball groups, and small scales, and I've become quite confident in my own healing skill as a result. So, when I heard that Tamriel Trade Secrets were dipping their toes into organized group play, I was eager to take on a new healing challenge. And this was going to be a challenge. Over on PCU I have almost 2300 CP, fully leveled characters of every class, and enough gold and resources to gear up my healers pretty much any way I want to. On PCNA though, I had one fully leveled character at CP 400, barely enough gold to buy new sandals, and barely any gear that was even close to acceptable. So if I wanted to be of any help to the group, I'd have to sort out my setup and also punch above my weight a little bit with how low my CP is in the Americas. Luckily, some of my PCNA friends from TTS and Twitter offered to help me with stuff like gear, pledges and other things. So after just a few days of grinding, I had a build that wasn't optimal but still sort of capable of helping out the group. Now, before I talk about my experiences on PCNA, I'll briefly summarize what the TTS group is about. In the past, TTS PvP events were called Zerg Nights, and that's what they were, a group of PvPers of varying levels of skill, all goofing around on our own builds. More recently, there's a bit more organization to the group. We all try to follow the crown, coordinate attack and defense, and are slowly working towards synergizing our builds and skills for a better performance. The level of sweat is very low though, so everyone is allowed to make mistakes and learn from them, and no one is told to do something they don't want to do. In short, it's a good learning environment that is still primarily about casual fun. It's also ideal for a player like me, as I cannot yet make a fully optimal build on NA, but I can help out with any questions regarding healing skills and gear. And after playing PvP nearly every week on PCEU for over a year, having a new challenge is fun of itself. By now I've healed during a handful of sessions, and one of the most interesting aspects of my experience so far is the profound differences between PCNA and PCEU in terms of gameplay, player habits and etiquette. I'll go over a few of my observations. For what it's worth, I only play on Blackreach on PCNA, whereas on PCEU I have experience on every campaign. It's a touchy subject, but I have to talk about the ball group situation on PCNA. Now, I'm familiar with the bad rap of ball groups, as ESO players complain about them everywhere in all ways. I used to hate them myself, but having played in a few, I kind of got a different perspective. If you don't know what a ball group is, it's basically a fully synchronized group of players, usually between 7 or 12 people, and they move as one or as a ball and try to overrun enemies with AoE damage and synergies, while also keeping each other alive through cross-healing. Now, I won't go over all the reasons why people hate them, and that's maybe something I'll cover in a different video, but most complaints stem from the feeling that they're too OP to be fought, and that it doesn't take much skill to play in one. Having played in different ball groups myself, I can comfortably say that playing in a good and effective ball group takes a good amount of skill, and it's way more intense than any form of casual play. On the flip side, it's up to the particular ball group to seek out challenges that match the group's power. And having seen a few ball groups in action on PCNA, I am really starting to understand where all those salty forum threads are coming from. First, let's talk about the group size. In several groups that I've played in, we had a hard limit on 8, 9 or 10 players for a raid, because we knew that with 12 players we would steamroll everyone, regardless of how well we performed individually. This is doubly true on the CP active servers, as you have sets like Vicious Death, Plague Break, Dark Convergence and Rush of Agony to easily nuke enemies, as well as the Snow Treader's mythic for snare immunity. This is why I prefer to play in a non-proc campaign, as playing well as a group without any of those sets feels much more rewarding. But even on there, a skilled ball group with 12 players would be very difficult to counter. But damn, on PCNA literally every group I've seen was a full 12 man. Some of them even seem to have secondary groups moving with them, resulting in ball groups of like 18 players. Most groups did not even move particularly well, or they had some dubious skill choices, like using inevitable detonation. But with that amount of people, you will just steamroll anyone who isn't specifically armed to counter a group like that. Another difference I noticed is PvP etiquette. During literally my first 15 minutes of being on PCNA back in the day, on my level 20 Nightblade, I got 3v1'd and teabagged by high level players, so this kind of set the tone as far as that's concerned. Returning to PCNA like 18 months later, I saw that this sort of mentality runs pretty deep. This will be a bit of a generalization, as you will encounter different players with different habits no matter which server you're on. But during my short time on PCNA, I did see some things I'd literally never seen before in hundreds of hours of PvP on the PCEU side. Going back to ball groups for a bit, I did see a lot of them chasing down solo players 12v1. Now this also happens on PCEU occasionally, usually when the player in question has slighted the ball group in some way or is running a broken siege build. But on PCNA it seemed to be the rule rather than the exception, with ball groups frequently chasing down players who weren't even engaging with them in any way. This was surprising to me, as in most organized groups I've played with, you would be told to leave solo players or even small groups alone, and if you tried to engage with them anyway, you would get yelled at.
Well, there's actually...
No, don't attack them, don't attack them, they're doing, don't attack them.
What also surprised me is that despite all these groups consisting of 12 players, they would often push alongside the Zerg or even alongside other ball groups. During one night on PCNA, I experienced what I think was the first ever time I got tryhard pushed by 2 full ball groups at the same time. I also saw this mentality manifest back when I first played on NA, since there are just so many ganking groups of like 8 players or even more who seem to enjoy ulti dumping players who are alone. By the way, I'm not saying that everyone on EU has a high sense of morality about a damn video game, but I was just surprised because the more sweaty groups over on our side tend to actively seek out challenging scenarios. On PCNA, I guess they were just looking for easy wins, no matter how cheap, which was kind of funny to behold. Out of all my observations, this is probably the most anecdotal and subjective one, as it's just based on what I've witnessed as well as some discussion with guildmates over builds. Generally, it seems that people on NA build super tanky, when compared to EU at least. I mean, tanks exist on both servers, and if you can make yourself hard to kill while still packing a ton of damage, there's no reason not to do it. But this tankiness also extends to places where it doesn't necessarily belong, or rather where it goes at the cost of more important things. At this point, I'm primarily a healer, so obviously I have some of my own ideas of what makes a good healing build. In my view, a healer can maximize their healing output while doing the minimum to match the survivability of the rest of the group. So if you're small scaling, that means you're gonna have to be pretty tanky, as everybody else will be too. If you fall too far below the threshold, you will just end up dying all the time on your team, so that's not good. But the bigger and more organized your group gets, the more you can rely on good positioning and cross-healing to keep you alive. Concretely, that means in groups of 6 or more, I usually don't play with any defensive sets, because I don't really need them, and by starting a set like that, I'm actively taking survivability away from my teammates. My healing builds usually only have like 20 to 25k resistances when buffed, and 30 to 33k health, because it's not really going to help my team if I stay alive long after they're all dead, especially if the reason they're all dead is because I lack the healing power and sustain to keep powerful heals going. When I look at any NA healing builds, they're often way tanky. A healing build seems to be considered sufficient when it's pretty much unkillable, and not when it puts out a ton of healing. Granted, a lot of builds you'll find online are made with small scaling or battlegrounds in mind, so that's perfectly valid. But I did find this mentality extends to all types of PvP. So you have to have 35k health, you have to have 35k resistances, you have to have a sword to shield back bar, you have to have Vampirism 3, or you're a liability to your team. Meanwhile, I don't have any of that, and I think I'm doing fine. On PCEU in any case. On PCNA I have accrued a number of stupid deaths, but part of that is because I'm still missing CP slottables and certain passives on my character. And then there's the fact that the different time zones are difficult to deal with physically. Still, I'm doing quite alright and I'm able to put out a shit ton of healing. I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. I think it extends beyond healing too, as I've seen people run 50k health or more in 12-man ball groups, which is definitely overkill. A friend told me that healers like me don't really exist on NA, so there will always be a bit of a disconnect between the way I go about things and the standards of the PC NA PvP community. This did add to the fun though, as I felt I had a profoundly different playstyle to most other players due to my EU experience. It may seem like I'm complaining about PCNA, but in reality I just enjoy the fact that it's so different from what I'm used to. But just to make sure I don't sound too negative, I will point out one aspect in which PCNA seems outright better to me than PCEU, which is finding action. Now, a disclaimer, I did do most of my gaming during White Strake's Mayhem, so servers were always going to be full, but even on PCEU that's no guarantee anything will actually happen on the map. In fact, there's a lot of moments where everyone just kind of waits for the other factions to attack and nothing happens. Not so much on PCNA. There's action everywhere. Big battles, zergs, ball groups, gankers. There are just so few moments to relax, and in that sense the experience is much closer to what Cyrodiil should be like all the time. I don't know, maybe things will die down again after Mayhem ends, but I just thought it was cool that we had to make zero effort to find action. You just go to any enemy keep and a big fight will break out. Like I said, I enjoy the fact that PCNA does things differently from PCEU. It makes for an actually novel experience, and those are hard to come by when you have multiple years of PvP experience under your belt. I'm not sure for how much time I'll be able to dwell in that unforgiving time zone every month, but I know that when I do, it'll be a welcome vacation from my familiar EU surroundings. Alright everyone, thanks for watching, I hope you found it interesting in some way. I'll see you out in the battlefield, and I wish everyone from the US a happy 4th of July and everyone from Canada a happy belated Canada Day.